The cardboard box sat on the porch like it didn't belong to anyone. Tilda Renfro stood at the bottom of the front steps, 22 years old, 5'6", a scar across her left palm from a slip with a grinder at 17, her hair pulled back, her work boots wet from the spring rain that had stopped an hour ago and started again. She looked at the box, then she looked at the front door, and then she looked at the small white square of paper taped to the door at eye level, her mother's handwriting. She could see that much from the bottom of the steps. She climbed up, 1 step, 2, 3. The note was short, 4 sentences, the kind of writing a person does when they have already decided and don't want to be talked out of it. Tilda, I need you to find somewhere else to live. I can't do this anymore. Don't come back, Mom. She read it twice, then a third time, because the brain does that. The brain refuses. The brain says, try again, try once more. Maybe the words will rearrange themselves into something a daughter can survive. They didn't. She tried the front door, locked. She walked around the side of the house, past the tulips her mother had planted 12 years ago, past the rusted bicycle she had ridden when she was 9, past the kitchen window that faced the side yard. She tried the back door, locked. She stood there, in the wet grass, in her work clothes, smelling faintly of metal and machine oil because she had just come off a 12-hour shift at Pelham's shop. And she did not cry. That was the strange part, the part she would think about later, years later. The way her body had decided all by itself without consulting her that crying was not what this moment required. What it required was a bus stop. She walked back to the front porch, picked up the cardboard box. It was heavier than she expected. Her mother had packed carefully. Tilda could feel the shape of her work boots through the cardboard, the angled edges of her notebook of welding blueprints, the soft mass of her welding gloves, her whole life, in a box, on a porch, in the rain. She walked to the bus stop at the end of the street. She did not look back, because if she looked back, she might do something stupid, like knock, like beg, like try. And Tilda Renfro had learned somewhere between 15 and 22 that begging didn't work in her family. You have to understand what kind of family she came from. The Renfros were people who made things with their hands. Her grandfather, Anselm, had stood at the same welding station at the Bethlehem Steel Plant in eastern Pennsylvania from 1952 until he retired. 43 years, same gloves, same goggles, same lunch pail. When he died, the only thing his widow kept of his was a single hammer, just one, out of the dozens he had owned. She kept the one with the cracked oak handle that he had carved himself when he was 19. That hammer hung in the garage of the Renfro house in Allentown, Pennsylvania, above the workbench, where Tilda could see it every day of her childhood. She grew up looking at that hammer. Conrad Renfro, her father, was a pipe fitter, 40 years at the local plumbers union. He could fit a pipe joint in his sleep. He could explain pressure ratios to a 5-year-old in a way that made sense. He could hand you a wrench without looking up and know by the weight of your reach whether you wanted the crescent or the pipe. He was not a man who used many words, but when he did, he chose them. Tilda's mother, Vesna Renfro, was a different kind of person entirely. Vesna had wanted a daughter who liked ribbons, who liked tea sets, who liked the things daughters in catalogs liked. Vesna had imagined a daughter who would grow up to wear a white dress and bring home a son-in-law and put a granddaughter in her arms by the time she was 45. Tilda was the wrong daughter for that imagination. By age 4, she could name every tool in her father's box. By age 6, she could solder. By age 10, she had welded her first piece of steel with a torch her father bought her at a garage sale on a Saturday morning. By age 12, she had stopped pretending to like the tea sets her mother kept buying her for Christmas. Vesna kept buying them anyway. The tea sets accumulated in a closet upstairs, boxed, unopened, like a slow-motion accusation. There were good years. There were years when Vesna stood in the doorway of the garage and watched Conrad and Tilda working together at the bench. And in those moments, in the slant of the late afternoon light, in the smell of soldering flux and metal shavings, in the way her husband leaned over their daughter's hand to show her the angle of the iron, Vesna sometimes smiled. It was a complicated smile. It was a smile that said, "I do not understand this child, but I love her, and I am trying." Tilda remembered those smiles for the rest of her life, but there were other years too. There was the year Conrad threw his back out, lifting a section of cast iron at a job in Bethlehem. He was 48 years old. The disc never recovered. He was on disability by the time Tilda was 15. That changed everything. Conrad was home all day, every day, reading, watching the small television in the living room, holding ice packs against the small of his back, refusing to take the painkillers the doctor prescribed because his own father had taken painkillers and died at 60. Vesna was angry, not at Conrad. She could not be angry at Conrad. Conrad had been hurt. Conrad was suffering. Conrad was the man she had married and the man she still loved. So she was angry at the only other person in the house. The anger was rarely direct. That was the thing. If it had been direct, Tilda could have answered it. It came out in other ways. It came out as, "The dishes are still in the sink, Tilda." As you tracked oil through the hall again. As I don't know why, a girl your age wants to spend Saturday at a welding shop. As other girls are going to dances tonight, Tilda. And Tilda learned over years to keep her head down and let the words pass through her like weather, because her father was sick, and her father needed her mother to be okay. And if the cost of her father having a peaceful house was Tilda absorbing what her mother could not say to him, then Tilda would absorb it. That was the deal she made, quietly, in her own head, at 15, standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing a plate. She got her first welding job at 16. Erskine Pelham ran a metal fabrication shop on the south side of Allentown. He was 62 years old at the time, widowed, childless, a grumpy old Pennsylvania Dutchman with hands like leather and a voice like crushed gravel. He had known Anselm Renfro from the steel plant. They had worked the same shift in 1973. Tilda walked into the shop one Saturday morning in March, 16 years old, carrying her grandfather's hammer in a canvas bag because she did not know what to do with her hands. She said, "I want to learn." Erskine looked at her over the top of his bifocals. He said, "Why?" She said, "Because my father can't anymore." That was the whole interview. Erskine took her on as an apprentice, paid her $7 an hour, made her sweep the shop floor for the first 6 months before he let her touch a torch, made her clean every tool she used, made her stand and watch him weld for hours at a time without speaking, without asking questions, just watching. She learned MIG, then TIG, then stick, then plasma cutting. She came home with new burn marks on her arms every Saturday. Vesna sighed every time she saw them. Conrad never sighed. Conrad just nodded, the kind of nod that was its own conversation. 6 years passed. Tilda turned 21. She had grown into a strong young woman with steady hands and a habit of standing very still when she was thinking. She could read a blueprint cold. She could weld a structural beam joint in under 10 minutes. She could spot a bad weld from across a room. She loved the work. She loved it the way some people love music, the way some people love the sea. It was the only thing in her life that made unambiguous sense. Conrad died on a Tuesday. Tilda was at the shop. It was March. She was working on a custom railing for a porch in Easton. The phone rang. Erskine took the call, walked over to her station, put one hand on her shoulder. He didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there. Then he said, "Tilda, sit down. I'm going to drive you home." She sat, because Erskine never told her to sit. Conrad had collapsed in the kitchen. Heart attack. Vesna had called the ambulance. The ambulance had taken him to St. Luke's. He had died on the way. He was 54 years old. The doctor said it was probably related to the medications he had been taking, or maybe not. The heart was a complicated organ. There were no certainties. There would be no autopsy. Tilda remembered very little of the next 3 days. She remembered the funeral home, the smell of lilies, the smell of her mother's perfume, the way her mother kept touching her own hair as if to make sure it was still there. She remembered the casket, the exact angle of her father's face, the fact that he looked smaller dead than he had looked alive, smaller and somehow also younger, like the pain had finally let go and let his face remember what it had looked like before. She wore a black dress that didn't fit her. Vesna had bought it the morning of the funeral from a store at the strip mall. The dress was a size too big in the shoulders. Tilda hadn't said anything. Inside her purse, she carried her grandfather's hammer. Not the whole hammer, just the head. She had unscrewed it from the handle the night before because she wanted something of her family with her that felt real, something she could close her hand around when the room got loud. She kept her hand around it through the entire service. There were maybe 40 people at the wake, some neighbors, some men from the union, 2 of her father's cousins, Erskine Pelham in his only suit, which still smelled faintly of machine oil even after the dry cleaning, and one man Tilda did not recognize. He stood in the back of the room, older, 65 maybe, tall, thin, wearing a dark gray suit that looked expensive but worn, the kind of suit a doctor might wear to a funeral. He watched her from across the room for most of the service, not in a creepy way, in the way a person watches when they are trying to decide something. Tilda noticed, but she was too tired to ask. After the casket closed, after the prayers ended, after the small reception with the tiny sandwiches Vesna had ordered from the deli, the older man waited until most of the other mourners had left. Then he walked over to her. He held out his hand. He said, "Tilda, my name is Linus Brierly. I was your father's doctor for the last 6 years of his life." She shook his hand. She did not know what to say. He said, "I have something for you." He asked me to give it to you. He was very specific about when. He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. He pulled out an envelope, a real envelope, the kind people used to use, heavy cream paper, a red wax seal pressed with a small symbol she couldn't quite make out, her name written across the front in her father's handwriting. Tilda, that was it, just her name, no address, no date. She took it. She said, "When am I supposed to open it?" Linus Brierly looked at her for a long moment. He said, "Your father told me you would know." Then he put on his hat. He nodded to her once, almost a small bow, the way a man from another century might bow to a young woman, and he left. She didn't see him for almost a year. She put the envelope in the bottom of her work bag that night. She did not open it, because she was 21 years old and she had just buried her father, and she did not have room inside her chest for whatever else was in that envelope. It stayed in the bottom of her work bag for weeks, for months. Through everything that came after, it stayed there, sealed, waiting. The thing nobody tells you about losing a parent at 21 is that the world doesn't stop. The world keeps going. The bills keep coming. The shop keeps running. The dishes keep needing to be done. And the surviving parent has to figure out who they are now without the person who anchored them. Vesna Renfro had been a wife for 31 years. She had built her entire identity around being the wife of Conrad Renfro, the mother of his child, the keeper of his small house, the buffer between him and his pain. When Conrad died, Vesna became something else, and she did not know what. The grief expressed itself first as exhaustion. She slept 12 hours a night. She woke up tired. She moved through the house like a person walking underwater. Then it expressed itself as forgetting. Small things at first. She put the milk in the cabinet instead of the refrigerator. She forgot the name of the woman she had been friends with since 1985. She found her car keys in the freezer one Tuesday morning and stood looking at them for a long time, trying to understand how they had gotten there. Tilda noticed, but Tilda told herself this is grief. This is what grief does. She had read about it. The internet had told her. Grief affected memory. Grief affected concentration. Grief made people forget where they put their keys. So she did not say anything, because what could she say? Mom, are you forgetting things more than usual? Mom, when was the last time you remembered Aunt Maddie's birthday? Mom, why are your car keys in the freezer? You could not ask those questions of a woman who had just lost her husband of 31 years. So Tilda did not ask them. Tilda did the dishes. Tilda made sure there was food in the house. Tilda came home from the shop in the evenings and sat in the kitchen with her mother, and they watched television together without speaking. And it was a kind of peace. For a while, for a few weeks. And then the anger started. It started in early May. Tilda came home from a Saturday shift to find her mother standing in the middle of the kitchen holding a coffee mug. Vesna said, "Where have you been?" Tilda said, "At the shop, Mom, same as every Saturday." Vesna said, "I called you 4 times. Tilda said, "I don't have any missed calls." Vesna said, "Yes, you do. I called 4 times. She held up her phone. Her thumb pointed at the screen. Tilda looked. The phone was off. Tilda said, "Mom, your phone isn't on." Vesna stared at the phone, then at her daughter, then at the phone again. And then the look on her face changed. The confusion sharpened into something else, something that looked for 1 second almost like fear, and then it was gone. Vesna said, "Are you saying I'm a liar?" Tilda said, "No, Mom, I'm just saying the phone is off." Vesna said, "Get out of my kitchen." Tilda got out of the kitchen. She went upstairs to her room, and she sat on the edge of her bed, and she pressed her fingers against her temples because she could feel something starting in her head that she did not have a name for. This was not grief, or not only grief, but what was it? She did not know. She told herself it would pass. It did not pass. The fights got worse over the summer. They were always about small things, always about Tilda, always about something Tilda had supposedly done or not done. The garbage, the driveway, the fact that Tilda left her boots by the back door instead of the front door. Vesna would start in a low voice. The voice would climb. Tilda would not respond. The not responding would make Vesna angrier. By August, Vesna was saying things she had never said before. Things like, "Your father spoiled you." Things like, you think you're better than me because you can use a welding torch. Things like, I should have had a different daughter. Tilda took the words. She let them pass through her. She made dinner. She washed the dishes. She went to bed. She did not tell Erskine. She did not tell anyone, because she still thought at the bottom of her heart that her mother was just grieving, that her mother would come back, that her mother was somewhere underneath this woman who said these things, waiting to surface. She told herself this for 10 months. She told herself this until the day in March when she came home and found the box on the porch. But before that day, before the box, there was the morning in October, about 7 months after Conrad's death, the morning Tilda went up to the attic. She had gone up to find a photograph of her father from when he was 25, standing in front of his first car, a 1971 Plymouth Duster. She wanted to put it in a frame and keep it in her room. The attic was the one part of the house Vesna had never reorganized. Boxes had stacked up there for decades. The dust was thick. The single bulb in the ceiling cast a yellow light that did not reach into the corners. Tilda climbed the pull-down ladder. She went to the back corner where the family photographs were kept. She knelt by the stack of cardboard storage boxes. She started lifting lids, and then she saw it. A cardboard box, sitting by itself, to the side of the photograph boxes, about 2 feet long, about a foot wide. It looked new, or newer than the others. The corners were not soft. The tape was still clean. She paused. She looked at it, because every cardboard box in that attic had been there for a decade. Everyone was soft with humidity. Everyone had her mother's loopy handwriting on the side Christmas ornaments. Tax documents 2009. Tilda, age 4 to 8. This box had no writing on it. She knelt down. She lifted the lid. Inside the box, her welding gloves, her work boots, 3 pairs of jeans, her grandfather's hammerhead, her favorite t-shirt, the notebook of welding blueprints she kept by her bed, her things. Tilda's hands did not move for a long time, because the brain, again, the brain refuses. The brain says this is not what it looks like. The brain says there is a reasonable explanation. The brain says maybe mom was going to donate these. Maybe mom was reorganizing your room. Maybe mom thought you'd outgrown them. Except her favorite t-shirt was in there, the one she wore every Sunday. Except her grandfather's hammerhead was in there, the one she had taken out of her purse and put back in her dresser drawer after the funeral. Except this was not a donation box. This was a leaving box. This was a box that had been packed for the moment when she would not be welcome in this house anymore. Tilda sat on the attic floor in the dust, and she looked at the box for what felt like an hour, but was probably 10 minutes. And then she did something that surprised her. She closed the lid, carefully, so it looked exactly the way it had looked before. She put the photographs back. She climbed down the attic ladder. She did not say anything to her mother, because she did not know what she would say, and because there was a part of her, a small, stubborn, hopeful part, that still believed her mother had just been having a bad week when she packed that box, that maybe she had unpacked it later, that maybe it was just there because Vesna had forgotten about it, the way she had been forgetting things since the funeral. Tilda chose to believe that for another 5 months. She chose to believe that, right up until the day the locked door and the note proved that her mother had not in fact forgotten, that her mother had simply been waiting for the right day. The right day was a Saturday in late March. Tilda came home from a 12-hour shift at the shop. It was just past 7 in the evening. The light was failing. The cold spring rain was just starting again. She walked up the driveway. She saw the cardboard box on the porch. She did not have to look inside to know what was in it. She had already seen what was in it 5 months ago, in the attic. And so when she read the note on the door, there was a way in which she had been reading that note for months. The note had been written in the moment Vesna had decided. The note had been written the day the box was packed. The note had been written somewhere even before that. The note had been waiting for Tilda to arrive at it. She read it 3 times, to be sure. Then she walked to the bus stop. She got on the next bus. It took her 3 transfers to reach the south side of Allentown. She got off at the corner of Sumner and Vine. She walked the 6 blocks to Pelham's shop. Erskine was just locking up. He turned. He saw her standing in the rain, holding the cardboard box, her hair plastered to her forehead, her work jacket soaked through. He did not ask any questions. He just said, "Come on, get inside." He unlocked the door. He held it open. He took the box from her arms and set it on the workbench. He turned on the small electric heater in the corner of the office. He poured her a cup of coffee from the thermos he had not yet emptied. He sat down across from her. He said, "How long have you had nowhere to go?" Tilda said, "Tonight." Erskine said, "Tonight is enough." He stood up. He walked to the file cabinet behind his desk. He opened the top drawer. He took out a key. He said, "I have a spare room behind the shop. You can stay there until you figure out what's next. I'm not going to charge you rent. Don't argue with me about it." Tilda said, "Erskine." Erskine said, "Don't argue with me." She did not argue with him. She lived in Erskine's spare room for 3 months. He did not ask questions. That was the gift he gave her, not the room. The room was just a room. The gift was the not asking. He let her come home in the evenings and sit at his kitchen table and eat dinner with him and not have to explain anything. He let her cry in the bathroom in the morning. He let her go quiet for hours at a time. He let her work 12 and 14-hour days at the shop without saying a word about it, because he understood, the way only someone who has lost people understands. He understood that work was not work for Tilda right now. Work was the thing keeping her alive. In the evenings after dinner, he would read the newspaper. He would mutter comments about the world. He would occasionally pass her articles he thought she would like, articles about steel mills, articles about Pennsylvania history, articles about people who built things. She read every article. She did not say much, but she was, slowly, the way a candle relights itself in stages, coming back into the room. By June, she was sleeping through the night again. By July, she was eating full meals. By August, she had not cried in 3 weeks. The grief had not gone anywhere. It was just changing shape, settling deeper, becoming a thing she carried instead of a thing she drowned in. And one evening in early August, after a particularly long day at the shop, she sat at Erskine's kitchen table with her laptop open, and she did something she had been avoiding doing for 5 months. She started looking for somewhere to live. She could not afford an apartment, not in Allentown. The cheapest one-bedroom was $800 a month plus a security deposit she did not have. She looked at houses. She could not afford a house. She looked at trailers. She could not afford a trailer. She typed something else into the search engine just to see what would happen. Cheapest property in Pennsylvania. The first result was a tax sale property in Philadelphia, $6,000, out of reach. The second was a hunting cabin in the Poconos, $12,000, out of reach. The third was a county surplus listing for a place called Snyder County, about 2 hours west. She clicked on it. The page loaded slowly. Erskine's Wi-Fi was bad. When it loaded, She read the description 3 times, because again, the brain refuses. Historic blacksmith shop, approximately 600 square feet, wood frame with brick chimney, located off Gravel Road in Port Trevorton, Snyder County, vacant since 1971. Current asking price $10. $10. A blacksmith shop for $10. She sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open, with Erskine reading the paper across from her, with the kitchen light on overhead, with the small fan blowing in the corner, with her hands very still on either side of the keyboard. A blacksmith shop. She had never run a coal forge in her life. She knew welding. Welding was modern blacksmithing in most practical senses. She could shape steel with heat. She could read iron the way her father had read pipe. She had been around metal since she was 4 years old. But a forge was something else. A forge was something her grandfather might have used. A forge was something out of the world her family had been pushed out of when the steel plant closed. A forge was something that belonged to a Pennsylvania that did not really exist anymore. She showed the listing to Erskine. Erskine read it, slowly, twice, the way he read everything. Then he looked at her over the top of his bifocals. He said, Snyder County. Tilda said, have you been there? Erskine said, once, in 1979. Fishing trip with your grandfather, as a matter of fact. He stopped. He folded his newspaper. He set it down on the table. He said, Tilda, let me tell you something about a shop like this. She listened. He said, a shop is not a building. A shop is a place where work happens. If you walk into it, if you light the fire, if you start working, the shop will tell you what it needs. That's how it goes. That's always how it's gone. My father told me that when I was 16. I am telling it to you now. She said, I don't know how to be a blacksmith. Erskine said, you don't know how to be a blacksmith on Tuesday. You'll know how to be a blacksmith on Wednesday. She laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in months. He smiled the small Pennsylvania Dutch smile of a man who has just succeeded at something he did not announce he was trying to do. He said, go look at it. Take the bus. See if the building feels right. The building will tell you. So she went. The bus from Allentown to Middleburg took almost 4 hours. It made 11 stops. It went through small towns with names she had never heard of. The road wound westward through the rolling Pennsylvania hill country. The trees were turning by then, mid-August, the first edges of color starting to creep in around the green. Tilda watched the country go by. In her work bag, on her lap, were 3 things: her grandfather's hammerhead, her father's old leather wallet, which she had taken from his dresser after the funeral and carried with her ever since, and the sealed envelope from Linus Brierly. She had not opened it. She had not opened it for almost a year. She had taken it with her when she left her mother's house. She had taken it with her to Erskine's spare room. She had taken it with her every day to the shop. It had ridden in the bottom of her work bag through every shift she had worked since the funeral, and every day, without exception, she had thought about opening it, and had not opened it. She was waiting for something. She did not know what. Today, on the bus, with the late summer light slanting through the dirty window and the hum of the engine vibrating up through her boots, she took it out of her bag. She held it in her lap. She looked at the small red wax seal, the symbol pressed into the wax. Up close, she could see it now. It was a small, stylized image. 2 crossed hammers, her father's handwriting on the front. Tilda. She traced her thumb along the curve of the T, the way he wrote his T's, the little flourish on the crossbar. She did not open it. Not yet. But for the first time in almost a year, she admitted to herself that she was going to open it someday. When the time came, she put it back in her bag. She looked out the window at the Pennsylvania countryside rolling by, and somewhere west of her, in a clearing off a gravel road in a township, she had never seen an old blacksmith shop that had been waiting for 50 years, felt the air shift, felt it the way a forge feels the first stirring of a draft before the fire is lit, felt a hand coming, a hand it had been waiting for without knowing it had been waiting, a hand carrying $10 and a hammer and a sealed envelope, and a grief so large she had not yet measured its edges. The bus crested a hill. The sign at the side of the road read Middleburg 6 miles. Tilda Renfro looked at the sign. She did not know it yet, but she was 3 hours from finding the thing that would change everything, and 10 months from finding out why her mother had really packed that box. The bus rolled on. The light went golden in the way August light does at 5 in the afternoon when summer is almost over but does not know it yet. And somewhere in the bottom of Tilda's bag, underneath the hammer and the wallet, the sealed envelope shifted against the canvas, quietly, the way letters do when they have been waiting a long time and know they will not have to wait much longer. The county clerk's office in Middleburg smelled like old paper and floor wax. Tilda pushed open the heavy oak door at 4:15 in the afternoon. The bell above the door chimed once, soft, like something out of a postcard. The woman behind the counter looked up. She was somewhere in her late 50s, reading glasses on a beaded chain, gray hair pinned back, a framed photograph of 3 grandchildren on the desk beside her keyboard. She wore a cardigan, even though it was August. She said, "Help you, honey." Tilda walked to the counter. She set down her work bag. She said, "I'm here about the listing in Port Trevorton." The woman did not move for a moment. Then she set down her pen. She said, "Which listing?" Tilda said, "The blacksmith shop, the $10 one." The woman took off her reading glasses. She let them hang from the beaded chain. She said, "The old Westergaard Smitty." Her voice changed when she said the name. It dropped half a register, the way people's voices do when they say a name that means something to them. Tilda said, "Yes, ma'am." The woman said, "Honey, nobody has opened that building since 1971. Tilda set a $10 bill on the counter. It was a single bill, folded once, smoothed out by hand on the bus ride over. She said, "I understand." The woman looked at the bill, then at Tilda, then at the bill again. She put her glasses back on. She said, "What's your name?" Tilda said, "Tilda Renfro." The woman said, "I'm Bryony Tilbrook. Been clerk in this county since 1998. She did not pick up the bill. She looked at Tilda for a long moment, not the way an older woman might look at a young woman with pity, not the way a bureaucrat looks at a customer, some other way, the way a person looks when they are deciding whether to tell you something they have been carrying for a long time. Finally, Bryony said, "Do you know anything about blacksmithing?" Tilda said, "I know welding. 6 years. Bryony said, "That's not the same." Tilda said, "I know it's not, but it's not nothing." Bryony nodded slowly. She said, "My father was a smith down in Lewisburg back in the 50s before the work dried up." She picked up the $10 bill. She did not put it in the cash drawer. She held it between her thumb and forefinger like it was a thing she was reading. She said, "He told me once about that shop, about Asaph Westergaard." Tilda said, "Asaph." Bryony said that was his name, the man who closed it up in 1971. She put the bill down on the counter. She slid it toward the cash drawer. She slid the drawer open. She put the bill inside. She closed the drawer. The transaction. Just like that. Less than a minute. She started filling out the paperwork. She said, "He was a good man." My father said, "Quiet, particular about his tools, the kind of man who knew the difference between a hammer and a hammer." Tilda did not know what that meant. She would learn what it meant. Bryony stamped a document, then another. Then she slid a small ring of keys across the counter. 3 keys on an old brass loop. They looked like they had not been touched in decades. She said, "There's a gravel track, 6 miles west of here. You can walk it. Most people do. Cars don't go well on it after the 2nd mile." Tilda picked up the keys. She held them in her hand. They were heavier than they looked. Bryony said one more thing. She said, "My father used to say about my grandfather's smithy when he was a boy. He said the building makes its own case. You show up, you light the fire, you start working, and the building tells you what it needs." Tilda looked at her. Bryony said, "I never understood what he meant by that. I think you might." Tilda did not know what to say. She said, "Thank you." Bryony said, "Go on, honey. Light's getting long." The gravel track went west out of Middleburg, past the Citgo station with the broken pump, past the white clapper church with the cemetery behind it, past the old Grange Hall that had not been a Grange Hall since 1962. The road turned to gravel after the 2nd mile. The fields rose on either side, corn on one side, hay on the other. The hay had been cut a week ago, and the stubble was golden in the late afternoon sun. Tilda walked, her work bag over her shoulder, her boots crunching on the gravel, the keys in her front pocket, the envelope, still sealed, still waiting, in the bottom of the bag. 6 miles is a long walk. 6 miles in the August heat is longer. She walked it anyway, because the bus only went as far as Middleburg, because she did not have a car, because she had no one to call, because this was something she was going to do alone or not at all. She walked it. The light went from yellow to gold to amber. She passed 2 farmhouses. One had a dog on a chain that did not bark at her. The other had laundry on the line. She passed a man on a tractor who lifted one hand in greeting. She lifted one hand back. She did not see another person for the last 3 miles. The gravel track curved north into a stand of oak and maple. The trees made a tunnel over the road. The air got cooler. The smell changed from hay dust to leaf mold to something deeper, older, and then, at the end of the track, in a small clearing, she saw it. The building was darker than she had imagined. That was the first thing. Photographs do not capture the way a building like this absorbs light. The wood was almost black, weathered to the color of charcoal. The siding was board and batten. The roof was steep and shingled. A few shingles missing, most still in place. A tall brick chimney rose from the right side of the building, stained darker than the wood. 50 years of coal smoke baked into the brick. A large central door on an iron track, hanging crooked, one roller broken, 2 small windows, iron bars across them, and above the door, swinging from a single rusted chain, an anvil-shaped wooden sign. The sign was faded almost beyond reading, but Tilda could just make out in raised letters that had once been painted white Westergaard Smith. Below it in smaller letters, Est 1898. She stood in the gravel track. She looked at it for a long time because it was beautiful. Not pretty, not picturesque, not the kind of beautiful that ends up on postcards. It was beautiful the way working things are beautiful, the way her grandfather's calloused hands had been beautiful when she was a child, the way the inside of her father's toolbox had been beautiful, the way a thing shaped entirely by what it was for is always beautiful to the people who recognize the shape. The building knew what it was for. It had always known. It was waiting. She walked up to the door. She tried the keys. The first one did not fit. The second one slid into the lock on the side door. She turned it. The lock resisted, then gave. She pushed. The door creaked open. She stepped inside. The interior was one large room, hard-packed earth floor, black with 50 years of coal dust. The walls the same dark wood as the outside. Iron hooks along the walls, most empty. A few still holding things. A pair of long-handled tongs. A leather apron hanging on a peg, stiff with age. A broken hammerhead, no handle. A hand-forged iron lantern bracket with a candle stub still in it from 1971. And in the center of the room, the forge. Tilda stood in the doorway. She did not move, because the forge was the largest one she had ever seen in person. Brick, about 4 feet square, 3 feet tall, a cast iron fire pot in the center, full of old ash, a wooden bellows handle attached to the side. The bellows itself dried and cracked, but still attached. Beside the forge, the anvil, massive, mounted on an oak stump cut flat to level it. The working face of the anvil scarred with the hammer marks of a man's whole working life. Someone had thrown a piece of canvas over it before they left. The canvas had kept the rust off. Beneath the canvas, Tilda could already tell the anvil was alive. That was the only word for it. A good anvil rings, even when it is cold, even when nobody has struck it in 50 years. She walked across the room, slowly, the way you walk into a church when you are not sure you believe. She lifted the canvas. She put her hand on the anvil face. It was cold. It was hard. It was the most perfectly machined piece of working steel she had ever touched. She tapped it with her fingernail. It rang, faintly, very faintly, a high pure note that lasted maybe half a second. But it rang. The building was awake. She stood there with her hand on the anvil for a very long time. She did not light the forge that night. She wanted to. The whole walk back from Bryony's office, she had been imagining it, striking the match, smelling the first smoke, hearing the first hiss. But she was not ready. She wanted to prepare it properly. She wanted to be ready. She walked back outside as the sun was setting. She sat on the wooden stoop in front of the side door. She took out a peanut butter sandwich Erskine had pressed into her hand that morning. She ate it. She drank water from her thermos, and as she sat there, in the last light of the August day, with the wood smoke smell of the dead forge still on her hands, she did something she had not done in 11 months. She took out the envelope. She looked at it in her lap. She held it for a long time, and then she did not open it because she was almost ready, but not quite. She put it back in her bag. She went back inside the shop. She unrolled her sleeping bag between the forge and the anvil. She lay down on the hard-packed earth floor. She listened to the building. Old buildings make sound at night. They settle. They breathe. They speak in the small language of expanding and contracting wood. This building spoke. Tilda fell asleep listening. The next morning she walked back into Middleburg. 6 miles. Again, she did not mind. The light was gentler in the morning, the cool of the night still in the air. She went to the hardware store. A man behind the counter, 60s, white hair, apron. He looked up when she came in. He said, "You're the girl Bryony was telling me about." Tilda said, "News travels." He said, "In Snyder County it does." He held out his hand. He said, "Wilmer Truitt, I own the place." She shook his hand. She said, "I need coal, the forge kind, bituminous if you have it." Wilmer raised an eyebrow. He said, "I haven't sold blacksmith coal in 11 years. He paused. He said, "But I happen to have some in the back. I keep it for old time's sake. Used to sell it to Asaph back when. Never threw it out." He went into the back room. He came out with a 50-pound bag of coal. He set it on the counter. Tilda reached for her wallet. Wilmer said, "Put your money away, miss." Tilda said, "Mr. Truitt." Wilmer said, "Asaph was a good man. You're lighting his forge again. You don't pay me for coal. I pay myself for the privilege of knowing it's going to good use." Tilda did not argue, because she was learning, quickly, that in this county, when people said something with that particular tone, you did not argue. She walked back to the shop with the 50-pound bag of coal on her shoulder. She walked it the entire 6 miles. She did not put it down once. She built the fire at noon. She cleaned the fire pot first, scraping out the ash, the clinkers, the dust of 50 years. She built a small pyramid of kindling. She added the first coals. She lit a wooden match. She held it against the kindling. The fire caught. She added more kindling, then more coal, slowly, carefully, the way she had read about, the way her grandfather had described once, long ago, when she was small. The bellows creaked when she pumped it, but it worked. Air blew up into the fire pot from beneath. The fire bloomed. Within 20 minutes, the forge was burning hot. Black smoke was rising up through the brick chimney. For the first time in 50 years, the Westergaard smithy was breathing again. Tilda stood in front of the burning forge. She picked up the leather apron from the peg on the wall. She put it on. It was too big for her. It had been Asaph's. He must have been a bigger man than her. The shoulders hung loose, the waist tied twice around her own waist. But it fit, in some other way, the way old work clothes fit, the way they remember the shape of work. She took a small piece of mild steel from the corner of the shop, a bar of stock somebody had left 50 years ago, still good, still steel. She picked up one of the tongs from the wall hook. She heated the steel. She watched it go from gray to dull red to bright cherry red. She brought it out of the fire. She set it on the anvil, and then she struck. The hammer rang against the hot steel. The sound traveled up through the roof beams, through the slate shingles, out into the August sky. Tilda was crying. She did not stop working. She struck again, and again, and again. The first piece of hot iron she had ever shaped in a real forge, with a real hammer, on a real anvil, in a real shop. She was making a hook. It came out crooked. She did not care. She quenched it. She set it on the rim of the forge. And then she did the thing she had been afraid to do. She walked to the rear of the shop. She had noticed it the day before, the gap behind the forge, between the brick of the forge and the rear wall. There was almost 3 feet of clearance. That was unusual. Forges were usually built closer to the wall to save space, but this forge had been built with room behind it. Tilda walked into the gap. She examined the rear wall. The boards there were darker than the rest, as if they had been stained differently or aged differently. She touched them, solid. She ran her hand along the seam where the boards met the floor. There, a gap, a seam that should not have been there. She knelt down. She pressed on the boards, from the floor upward, about 4 feet off the ground. One board moved slightly under her hand. She pushed harder. The board, and the 2 boards on either side of it, swung inward together. A panel, a concealed panel, held in place by friction, and a small wooden catch she could now see from the inside, behind the panel, a storage compartment, about 3 feet deep, running the width of the 3 concealed boards. Inside the compartment, stacked against the back of the shop's outer wall, wooden crates. Tilda pulled the first crate out. It was heavy. She set it on the cool rim of the forge. She lifted the lid. Hammers, hand tools, blacksmithing tools. She lifted the first hammer out of the crate. The head was forged. The hickory handle was smooth with use. She turned it in her hand. She felt the balance. It was perfect. It was the most beautifully balanced hammer she had ever held. Hand forged by a man who had known what he was doing for himself, for his own hand, to last his whole life. She set it down. She lifted another, and another, and another. Tongs, flat tongs, scrolling tongs, box jaw tongs, wolf jaw tongs, dozens, each one made by hand, punches, chisels, files, stamps. She pulled out the second crate. More tools. The third, smaller items. A set of fine chisels in a wooden box lined with felt. The fourth, books. Old books. Some very old. Blacksmithing manuals from the 19th century. A handwritten notebook in pencil and pen. The pages filled with drawings of tools and processes and measurements, and the kind of careful notes that a craftsman keeps when he is teaching himself his own trade. And at the bottom of the fourth crate, beneath the books, a small leather pouch and a sealed envelope. Tilda opened the pouch first. Inside the pouch, gold coins, small, old, heavy. She counted them. 38. She did not know exactly what they were worth, but she knew that gold coins of that age, American eagles, half eagles, from the 1890s to the 1920s, were worth many times their face value, hundreds of dollars each, some thousands. She set the pouch down. She was breathing differently now, the way you breathe when something is happening that you do not yet have words for. She opened the envelope. The paper inside was heavy, cream-colored, the ink brown with age. The handwriting was careful, the handwriting of a man who had spent his life doing precise work with his hands. It read, "To whoever finds this, my name is Asaph Westergaard. I have been the blacksmith in Port Trevorton since 1924. My father was the blacksmith before me from 1898 to 1924. Together we have worked this forge for nearly 70 years. I am writing this letter in the summer of 1971, knowing that I will soon close this shop for the last time. My hands are no longer strong enough for the work. I have no children. The trade is dying in this country. Most of what a blacksmith used to do is now done in factories. There is no one to leave this shop to. I have hidden my best tools behind the forge in a compartment my father built for this exact purpose. He told me once that you should never leave good tools for the auction. Good tools should go to someone who understands them. I have hidden them with that belief. The gold coins are from my father's savings. He did not trust banks after 1933. He kept his savings in gold in a small pouch under the floorboards of our house. When he died, he left them to me. I have not needed them. I leave them now for whoever finds these tools. If you are the person who finds this compartment, I trust you are the kind of person who still cares about making things with your hands. You have earned these tools. You have earned the coins that come with them. Take them all with my blessing. But I ask one thing of you. Relight the forge, even just once. Let this shop know that someone came for it. A forge that has been cold for 50 years remembers every fire that ever burned in it, and it waits for the next one. I have been hearing that waiting my whole life. I could not give the forge what it wanted at the end. I hope you can. Asaph Westergaard, August 1971. Tilda read it twice. Then she folded it carefully. She put it back in the envelope. She sat down on an overturned crate. The afternoon sun was slanting through the dusty windows in pale bars that fell across the anvil and the forge, and the tools scattered around her. She was crying again, for the second time in 24 hours, for the second time in 11 months, because she had relit the forge without knowing it, the way Asaph had asked. The hook she had just made, the crooked one, was the relighting he had been waiting for. He had been waiting 50 years for her. She slept that night with the letter under her head. In the morning, she made a list of what she had to do. She had to sell some of the coins, not all, just enough to live on and fix the building. 8 maybe. She would keep 30 as an emergency fund, the way Asaph's father had kept them. She had to get the building structurally sound before winter. The roof, the crooked door, the windows. She had to build a place to sleep, a loft, in the corner, with a wood stove. She had to learn how to be a blacksmith. She wrote all this down on a page from her welding notebook. She wrote it in the same handwriting she had used since she was 8 years old. She underlined the last item twice. The coins went to a dealer in Philadelphia. She took the bus down. She wore her cleanest clothes. She brought one of the coins to a coin shop. A man in a green visor looked at it for a long time with a jeweler's loupe. He said, "Miss, where did you get this?" She said, "I inherited it." He said, "From who?" She said, "From a man named Asaph Westergaard. He died in 1985, I think. He left it to whoever opened his shop next." The man looked at her over the loupe. He said, "That's an unusual inheritance." She said, "I know." He paid her $420 for the single coin. He told her some of the others might be worth more. He told her not to sell them all at once. He told her to come back in 3 months, with 3 or 4 at a time, to avoid IRS issues. She came back 3 times. In 3 months, she sold 8 coins. She walked out with just over $24,000 in a checking account that had been opened in her name at a small bank in Selinsgrove. She kept the other 30 coins. She put them in the same leather pouch. She put the pouch in a new hiding place she had chosen herself. She did not tell anyone where it was, not even Erskine. That was the rule she made. The coins were emergency money, the way they had been emergency money for the man before her, the way they would be emergency money for whoever came after. The work on the building took 2 months. She did most of it herself. She hired one local carpenter, a man named Wilmer's nephew, named Othniel Truitt, who came out in his truck with a load of new shingles. He helped her redo the roof in 3 days. He charged her $200 and a cup of coffee. She did the door herself, new rollers on the iron track. She straightened the door so it slid level. She glassed the windows herself. She built a small loft in the back corner of the shop, 4 feet off the ground, with a ladder, a mattress, a small camp kitchen, a wood stove she found at a salvage yard in Sunbury for $40. She moved in at the end of October. She slept in the loft. She cooked on the camp stove. She washed in the small enamel basin she had set up by the door. She worked the forge every day. She made mistakes. She burned pieces of steel by heating them past the point of working. She made hooks that came out crooked. She split the handle of one of Asaph's hammers by striking wrong. She hand-carved a new handle from hickory. It took her 2 days. She learned the way her grandfather had learned, the way her father had learned, the way Asaph had learned before her, slowly, patiently, by doing the work wrong, until she did it right. In November, she opened Asaph's notebook again. She had been reading it in small pieces, a page or two each night by lamplight. It was full of drawings, of measurements, of notes about how to forge specific tools, how to weld iron with a coal fire, how to draw out a piece of steel without losing carbon, how to set a hardy. She loved the notebook. It was the most personal thing she had ever been given by a stranger. That night, a cold night in mid-November, the wood stove burning in the corner, the wind rattling the windows, the forge banked low against the morning, she opened to a page she had not read yet. Dated September 1962, she read. The page was about an auxiliary anvil Asaph had been forging for a job. He needed help with the heavy work. He wrote about it the way blacksmiths wrote about everything, with practical detail, with the names of the men involved. And then, halfway down the page, she stopped because there was a name there, a name that did not belong. Asked Anselm Renfro to come down from Bethlehem this weekend to help with the body work. We met after the war, working out east. He is one of the best welders in the eastern part of the state. He works at the steel plant now, but still does forge work on the side. He brought down 2 of his apprentices, and we finished the second anvil in 3 days. Good man, quiet, worked like his hands belonged to the iron. Tilda read the paragraph. Then again, then a third time, because the brain, again. The brain refuses. The brain says this is not what it looks like. Anselm Renfro, her grandfather, had worked in this shop, in this room, at this forge, 60 years before her. He had stood where she was standing, right now. He had held one of these hammers, maybe the one she was using. He had felt the weight, he had heard the ring, he had breathed the coal smoke, and he had never told anyone in his family, not his son, not his granddaughter, not anyone, or maybe he had told, and the telling had been lost, forgotten, dropped between generations the way so many things get dropped. But Asaph had remembered, Asaph had written it down, and 60 years later, a girl with the same last name, thrown out of her mother's house with $10 in her pocket, had walked through this door. Tilda closed the notebook. She looked at the forge. She looked at the hammer in her hand. The thought arrived, all at once, the way the most important thoughts do. This was not a coincidence. This was not random. This was something else, something that had been waiting. The way Asaph said, the forge had been waiting, not waiting for anyone, waiting for her. She did not sleep that night. She sat on the floor of the loft with the notebook in her lap, and Asaph's letter beside her, and her grandfather's hammerhead in her hand. She thought about her grandfather, the few things she knew about him, the way he had retired when the steel plant work dried up, the way he had died in 2001 when she was 4, the way he had given her a small toy hammer for her 3rd birthday, which she still had in a drawer somewhere at her mother's house. She thought about how much he had not told, about how much fathers and grandfathers do not tell. She thought about her own father, about the sealed envelope, still in the bottom of her work bag, almost a year now, almost ready, but not quite. By December, she was selling her first work, garden tools, fireplace sets, hooks and hangers, simple hardware. She set up a booth at a small craft fair in Selinsgrove and sold everything she brought in the first 90 minutes. People started finding their way to the shop. A farmer named Goodyear Helfrich came out one Tuesday in early December and ordered a custom gate hinge. He paid in advance, cash. He said, "You're the Renfro girl, aren't you? Bryony told me, welcome to the county." A bride from a town 2 counties over drove out in late January and asked Tilda to forge a pair of wedding rings by hand from scratch because the bride's father had been a steel worker and she wanted her ring to come from a forge. Tilda forged the rings. It took her 9 days. The bride cried when she saw them. A writer from a regional magazine called Susquehanna Country drove out one afternoon in March. He stayed 3 hours. He took photographs. He asked questions. He went back to his office. He wrote an article. It ran in the magazine's spring issue. The headline was "The Last Blacksmith of Snyder County." Tilda read the article. She drove to a payphone in Middleburg. She called the magazine. She asked them to change the headline. She said, "I'm not the last. I'm the next." The editor was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You know what, miss? You're right." He changed it in the online edition, "The Next Blacksmith of Snyder County." The phone started ringing after that. The first time Erskine came to visit was on a Friday in late March. He pulled up in his pickup truck, got out, walked around the shop in silence, touched the anvil, touched the forge, held one of Asaph's hammers in his hand, felt the balance. He set the hammer down. He looked at Tilda. He said, "Your grandfather would have wept." Tilda said, "Erskine, there's something I have to tell you." She told him about the notebook, about the entry, about Anselm, about 1962. Erskine listened. He did not look surprised. That was the strange part. When she finished, he sat down on an overturned crate. He folded his hands in his lap. He said, "Tilda, I knew." She said, "You knew what?" He said, "I knew your grandfather had worked down here. He told me once, in 1979, on the fishing trip I mentioned, he said he had a friend down here, a smith, named Westergaard. He said the man was getting old and was thinking about closing his shop. He said he was sad about it." Tilda said, "Erskine." Erskine said, "I did not put it together. When you showed me the listing, the name of the township, the Westergaard shop, I should have. I am sorry. I was old and I was tired and I did not put it together until you said the name just now." He looked at her. He said, "Your grandfather wrote a letter to Asaph in 1971. I do not know what was in the letter, but Asaph wrote one back. Anselm showed me the reply once, years later. The reply said something like, 'Anselm, I have made arrangements. The shop will be left for whoever finds it. Do not worry. The tools will go where they should go.'" Tilda said, "He knew." Erskine said, "He suspected. He did not know it would be you. He could not have known, but he knew it would be someone who would find it, the way Asaph said in his letter to you." Tilda sat down on the floor. Erskine said, "There is one more thing." He reached into the bag he had brought. He pulled out a small wooden box. He set it on the floor between them. He said, "I have been carrying this around for 25 years. I was supposed to give it to your father when he was ready. He was never quite ready. Then he died. I thought about giving it to your mother. I knew better. So it has been sitting in my dresser drawer, waiting." Tilda lifted the lid. Inside the box, her grandfather's hammer. The whole hammer, not just the head, the original, the one with the cracked oak handle he had carved when he was 19, the one she had taken the head off of for her father's funeral and put back together and kept on her dresser at her mother's house. This was a different hammer. This was an older hammer. This was the one her grandfather had used for 43 years at the Bethlehem steel plant, his working hammer. Tilda touched the handle. She closed her hand around it. She fit. Her hand fit, like her grandfather had carved the handle for her hand 60 years before she was born. She looked up at Erskine. She did not say anything. Erskine said, "Hang it on the wall with the others, where it belongs." She hung it on the wall that evening, above the forge. 3 hammers now, in a row, Anselm's, the new one, heavy, with the cracked handle, Asaph's, the one she had been using, hand-forged, by a master, and her own, the one she had carved a handle for herself, from hickory, 6 weeks ago, after she split the original. 3 generations of hands that had worked metal, 3 hammers on one wall. She stood in front of them, in the dimming light of the late March evening, in the warm room, with the forge banked, with the wood stove ticking softly in the corner. She felt, for the first time since her father had died, that she was somewhere, that she belonged to somewhere, that somewhere belonged to her. She did not see it coming. That was the thing about good days, about the days when you felt yourself coming back into shape, when you felt the world solid under your feet again. You did not see what was coming. The lawyer's letter arrived on a Tuesday in early April. She walked down to the rural mailbox at the end of the gravel track. She did this every Friday. She had not checked it the previous Friday because she had been working on a commission in the mailbox. A thick white envelope. Return address, Marbridge and Hexler, attorneys at law, Williamsport. She opened it standing at the mailbox. She read. Then she read again. Then she sat down on the gravel. The letter was from a man named Dorset Westergaard. The letter claimed that Dorset Westergaard was the great-nephew of Asaph Westergaard, that he was the legal heir to all property previously owned by Asaph Westergaard at the time of his death, that the county had no legal right to sell the property to Tilda Renfro in the first place, that the gold coins, the tools, the shop itself, were the rightful inheritance of the Westergaard family. The letter demanded that Tilda surrender the gold coins, the tools, and vacate the premises within 90 days, or face legal action. Tilda sat on the gravel. She read it a third time. She felt something cold start in the center of her chest. She walked back to the shop. She set the letter on the workbench. She walked over to her bag. She unzipped the bottom compartment. She took out the sealed envelope, her father's envelope. She held it in her hand. She had been waiting almost a year. She did not know if today was the right day, but she knew. She knew with the same certainty she had felt when she put her hand on the anvil for the first time, that the time was getting close. She put the envelope on the workbench, beside the lawyer's letter. She sat down on the overturned crate. She looked at both pieces of paper. One demanded she leave. One demanded she stay. She did not know yet which one she would obey, but she was about to find out. The sun was setting. The light in the shop went amber and then red and then began to fade. Tilda Renfro sat in the gathering dusk of her own forge, with 3 hammers on the wall above her, with 30 gold coins hidden where no one could find them, with a letter from a dead man telling her the building was hers, and a letter from a living man telling her it never was. She put her hands on her knees, and she made a decision. She would open her father's envelope tonight. Whatever was in it, she was ready. She had finally arrived at it. She lit a lamp, the kerosene one, not the electric, because tonight was not a night for electric light. She set the lamp on the workbench. She sat on the overturned crate. She picked up her father's envelope. She turned it over in her hands 3 times, 4, like a person warming a stone before they put it in their pocket. The wax seal was still intact. 11 months. 11 months she had carried this envelope in the bottom of every bag she had owned, through Erskine's kitchen, through the bus station, through the gravel track to the shop, through every shift at the forge. It had outlasted her grief, or learned to live alongside it. She slid her thumbnail under the wax. It cracked, a small dry sound, like a twig snapping. She opened the envelope. Inside, not 1 letter, 6. 6 letters, folded, stacked, each one numbered in the upper right corner. In her father's careful hand, 1 of 6, 2 of 6, and so on. She set them on the workbench in order. She picked up the first one. She read, Tilda. If you are reading this, then either I am dead or your mother has done what she said she would do, or both. I am writing this in the fall of 2018. You are 18 years old. You are working at Erskine's shop on Saturdays. Your mother and I are not speaking about you tonight, but we have been speaking about you most nights for almost 3 years now. Mostly, your mother has been speaking. I have been listening. I will not survive this. The doctor said 2 years ago that my heart was a tired heart. I did not tell you. I did not tell your mother. I have only told Linus Brierly. I made him promise to keep the secret. I do not want to spend my last years being treated like a sick man. I want to spend them watching you become what you are becoming. But there is something else you need to know, and I am writing it down because I do not have the courage to say it out loud while I am alive, and I am not sure I will live long enough to find that courage. Tilda, your mother is sick. She does not know yet. The signs are small, the forgetting, the repeating, the sudden anger when something does not match what she remembers. I have been watching it for almost 3 years. I have read everything Linus could give me to read. The doctors call it early onset. It is the same word they use for your grandfather, my father, the man whose hammer hangs in our garage. He had it too. He died with it at 60. Your mother does not know that part of his story. I never told her. By the time I met her, my father had been dead for 10 years, and I did not want her to marry into a family with that kind of shadow. I should have told her. That is my one regret. I will carry it with me wherever I go. She will get worse, Tilda, slowly at first, then less slowly. She will say things that are not her. She will do things that are not her. She will become a person you do not recognize. And then someday, late in this thing, she will not recognize you either. By the time you read this, that is already starting. Linus is going to give you this envelope when I ask him to. He has a list of 6 letters. Each one is to be opened when you are ready. He will not push you, but he will know. He has known me for a long time. He has known how to wait. Open the next one when you are alone, and when you are somewhere that feels like yours. I love you more than I ever knew how to say. Dad. Tilda set the letter down. Her hands did not shake. That surprised her, because every other part of her was shaking, but not her hands. Her hands were quiet, the way her father's hands had been quiet when he was reading something difficult, or thinking through a pipe joint, or holding her face in his palm when she was small. She picked up letter number 2. She read, Tilda, some things I want you to know about your mother that you might not know. She loved you the moment she knew she was pregnant. I was there. I saw it. She put her hand on her stomach. She did not even know if it was true yet. The test was on the bathroom counter. She had not looked at it, but she already knew, and she put her hand on her stomach and she said your name, just like that. Out of nowhere, she said, Tilda. We will call her Tilda. She had been carrying that name for years, she told me later. She had read it in a book when she was 16. She had not known why she had loved it. She had just kept it, the way some women keep names. She wanted you for a long time. The way she expressed it confused her. She thought a daughter was a particular kind of thing. She thought she had to teach you to be a particular kind of thing. When you turned out to be a different kind, she did not know what to do. She got it wrong sometimes. She got it wrong a lot. But the tea sets, Tilda. The tea sets she kept buying. Every Christmas a tea set. Every Christmas you would smile politely and put it aside. I want you to know, those tea sets were not your mother trying to make you into someone else. Those tea sets were your mother holding on to the only language she had for love. She did not know how to speak welding to you. She did not know how to speak iron. She did not know how to speak garage. So she spoke tea set, year after year, the wrong language, loudly, repeatedly, hoping you would somehow translate it. She loved you in the only language she had. I should have helped her find the right language. I did not know how either. I just did what came naturally. I let you in the garage. I let you weld. I let you become yourself. And I should have spent more time helping your mother learn the language of who you actually were. I am asking you, Tilda, wherever you are when you read this, whatever your mother has done by now, try to remember the tea sets. That was love, in the wrong language, but it was love. Dad. Tilda stood up. She walked to the side door. She opened it. The April night air came in, cold, the smell of wet earth. She stood in the doorway. She breathed. Because of the tea sets. Because she had thrown out half of them 2 summers ago. Vesna had asked her to help clean the upstairs closet, and Tilda had taken 3 of the unopened tea sets to the Goodwill drop box on Tilghman Street. She had thought she was helping. She had not been helping. She had been throwing away her mother's love letters. She had not known. She had not known. Of course she had not known. A daughter is not supposed to know. A father is supposed to tell her, and her father had been trying, in the only way he knew, in a sealed envelope, with 6 letters in it, numbered, so she would read them in the right order after he was gone, so that what she had been blaming herself for could be properly accounted to the woman who had actually been speaking in the wrong language, but speaking. Tilda stood in the doorway of her forge. The April wind moved through her hair. She did not close the door for a long time. She read the 3rd letter sitting back on the crate. It was shorter. Tilda. The 3rd letter is the practical one. Your mother has a condition. I have left a folder of medical information with Linus. He will give it to you when you ask. It includes the name of a specialist in Philadelphia. It includes the medications she will probably need. It includes the things to watch for. One thing to know, she will not want to know. Not at first. Some part of her already knows and is fighting against the knowing. If she pushes you away, anytime, for any reason, please understand, it is the fear, not you. The fear of becoming a person who hurts you without meaning to. The fear of forgetting who you are. The fear of being a burden. The fear of all the things that come with this disease. If she pushes you away, do not push back. Do not fight her on it. Let her have the distance she needs. Stay where she can find you. When she is ready, she will find you. She will find you. Dad. Tilda set the letter on the workbench. She had to stand up. She walked across the shop floor. She walked to the rear wall, where the hidden compartment was, where she had pried open the boards 7 months ago. She put her hand on the wall. She leaned her forehead against the dark wood because she had been throwing herself out of that house every day for the last 3 years, in her own mind. Every time her mother snapped at her, every time her mother called her a name, every time her mother stood in the kitchen and said the cruel, impossible thing, Tilda had taken that, had let it into her body, had built a small room in her chest where she kept the slow proof that she was the kind of daughter a mother could not love. She had been wrong. Every day, for 3 years, she had been wrong. Her mother had been pushing her away because her mother was terrified of the woman she was becoming, not of Tilda, of herself. Tilda stood with her forehead against the wall of Asaph's shop for a long time. She let herself cry, properly cry, for the first time since the funeral, not the dry, shocked tears of that day, the other kind, the kind that come up from somewhere underneath your ribs and break the lock and come out. She cried for almost an hour. She did not feel sorry for herself. She felt sorry for her mother, which was the first new feeling she had had about her mother in a year. She read the 4th letter. It was about Anselm. Tilda, your grandfather did some work for a smith in Snyder County in the 1960s and the 1970s. His name was Asaph Westergaard. They were friends. Anselm did not tell me much. He told me Asaph was the finest smith he had ever known. He told me Asaph had a shop with a forge that rang like a church bell. He told me he had once tried to give the shop to me when I was 20. I was not ready. I was scared of the work and scared of leaving Allentown and scared of being who my father needed me to be. I said no. My father did not push. I have wondered all my life what would have happened if I had said yes. Tilda, if you ever find yourself out in that country, if you ever find yourself near a township called Port Trevorton, look up Asaph Westergaard. Tell him my father sent you. He will know the name. Whether he is alive or not, the shop may still be there. The work waits sometimes for the next hands. I learned that too late. You will not learn it too late. I think I knew that the day you were born, the day you came out of your mother screaming with your fists already closed, like you had already decided to hold on to things. I knew you were the one who would be ready when I was not. Go find it if you can. Go find it and light it, Dad. Tilda set the letter down. She walked over to the forge. She put her hand on the rim. The brick was warm. The fire had been banked low for the night, but it was still alive. She stood there, and she said, out loud, because there was no one to hear, and the words needed to leave her body. She said, Dad, I found it. The forge did not answer, but the building did. The building made the small sound it always made at night, the wood settling, the old timber shifting half an inch, the metal of the roof cooling. The building heard her, and it answered, in the only language it knew. She did not read the 5th letter that night. She was too tired. She slept in the loft with her father's letters on the bed beside her, the wood stove burning low in the corner, the April wind moving in the trees outside. She slept 7 hours without waking. When she woke, it was morning, the light coming through the windows pale and silver, the forge gone gray and cold during the night. She made coffee on the camp stove. She sat at the workbench. She picked up letter 5. Tilda, the 5th letter is the legal one. You should know. Linus is also keeping a folder of papers for you. In it, a copy of my will, a copy of your mother's will, a list of who knows what about her condition, and when they were told. A signed letter from me to the doctor at Lehigh Valley confirming that I knew about her diagnosis before I died. Why am I telling you this? Because if your mother ever becomes someone you have to fight for, or someone you have to fight against, you will need the papers. If she ever needs to be put somewhere safe, if she ever needs care that you cannot give her, if her sisters ever try to step in and take away your right to make decisions, the papers will help. Linus will give them to you when you ask. One more thing. Your mother does not know about this envelope. She does not know about the letters. She does not know I told Linus about her condition. I am protecting her in the only way I can, by making sure that when she is no longer able to speak for herself, you will know what she would have wanted, because you and I have talked about it. In your head, you have been listening to me for 21 years. You know how I think. You know how I would think about her. Trust your instincts when the time comes. Dad. Tilda set the letter down. She picked up her phone. She called Linus Brierly. It was the first time she had called him. He answered on the second ring, as if he had been waiting, as if he had been waiting for almost a year, which he had. He said, "Tilda." She said, "I read them." There was a pause. He said, "How many?" She said, 5. "I have one left." He said, "Save it for when you are ready." She said, "Dr. Brierly." He said, "Tilda, Linus is fine." She said, "Linus, the folders, the medical folder and the legal folder, I want them." He said, "I will mail them tomorrow morning." She said, "Thank you." He said, "Tilda." She said, "Yes." He said, "Your father was the best patient I ever had, and one of the best men I ever knew." She said, "I know." She did know. She had always known. She did not read the 6th letter for a long time because she had work to do, because Dorset Westergaard was still out there, threatening to take everything, because she was still 22 years old, with a forge to run and a building to defend and a life to keep building, one day at a time. The folders arrived on Friday. She read them by the wood stove on Friday night. By Saturday morning, she knew what to do. She drove into Selinsgrove to a lawyer named Marjorie Whitcomb, who Bryony had recommended. Marjorie was 68 years old, had been practicing law in Snyder County since 1981, and charged $75 an hour for new clients. Tilda sat across from Marjorie's desk. She put the lawyer's letter from Marbridge and Hexler in front of her. Marjorie read it. Marjorie's face did not change. Marjorie said, "Honey, Pennsylvania has an abandoned property statute that has been on the books for over half a century. The county foreclosed on this parcel back in the 80s for back taxes. The Westergaard estate had a window to claim it. They did not. After that window closed, the parcel reverted to the county. Anyone who suggests otherwise is bluffing." Tilda said, "He has a lawyer." Marjorie said, "He has a lawyer who is hoping you do not have one." Tilda said, "He says the gold coins." Marjorie said, "The gold coins were not on the parcel. They were inside a sealed letter addressed to whoever found them. That is a gift, not an estate asset. We have case law in this very county that establishes the rule for finder's rights when a property is sold at county surplus." Tilda said, "So I have a case." Marjorie said, "You don't have a case. You have a victory waiting to happen. The other side has nothing." Marjorie wrote a reply letter that afternoon. She used words like frivolous and time-barred and consider yourself on notice. She mailed it Monday. The reply came faster than Tilda expected. It came not in the mail. It came in the person of Dorset Westergaard himself. He pulled up in front of the shop on a Thursday afternoon in late April. A black SUV, mud on the tires, vanity plates that read DWESTGRD. Tilda was at the anvil. She heard the car. She set down her hammer. She walked to the doorway. She did not take off her apron. Dorset got out of the SUV. He was about 50, soft around the middle, a suit that did not fit, the kind of cologne you can smell from 20 feet away. He walked up to the shop. He stopped about 10 feet from Tilda. He said, "Miss Renfro." Tilda said, "Mr. Westergaard." He said, "We seem to have started off on the wrong foot." Tilda said, "We have not started off on any foot." He said, "I think there has been a misunderstanding." Tilda said, "I think your lawyer overreached." He said, "Look, the truth is, I know that legally. The property is yours, technically, but morally, tradition has always." Tilda said, "Did you ever meet Asaph Westergaard?" Dorset said, "I am his grandnephew." Tilda said, "That is not what I asked." Dorset said, "I what?" Tilda said, "Did you ever meet him? Once? Anywhere? In your life?" Dorset said, "I." Tilda said, "Just answer." Dorset said, "No." Tilda nodded. She said, "I have been reading his notebook for 7 months. I know about every cousin he ever met, every aunt, every uncle. He wrote down birthdays. He wrote down funerals. He wrote down who he sent Christmas cards to. Your name is not in there once." Dorset said, "I." Tilda said, "He did not have your address. He did not have your phone number. You did not exist to him. The family that exists to him is whoever stands inside this shop with their hand on his anvil." Dorset opened his mouth. He closed it. Tilda said, "I want you to leave." He did not move. She said, "Mr. Westergaard, there are 43 people in this county right now who care about what happens to this shop. Most of them remember Asaph. Some of them are his neighbors. Some of them are the children of his neighbors. They have been coming out here for 9 months. They have been telling me stories. They have been ordering work. They have been welcoming me into a community I did not earn, but which they have given me anyway, because of who they think I am, and because of who they remember he was." She took a step forward. She said, "If you sue, they will come to court. They will testify. They will tell the judge what Asaph wanted, what he would have wanted, what he wrote in his letter to whoever found the shop. They will stand up for the shop the way they have stood up for me." She took another step. She said, "And you will lose, and you will go home, and you will not be welcome in Snyder County again, not at the diner, not at the gas station, not at the parade in July, not anywhere, because that is the kind of county this is. They remember." Dorset Westergaard stood in the gravel. His face had gone the color of cold ash. He said something, quietly. Tilda did not catch it. She said, "What?" He said, "I needed the money." There it was, the actual truth. After all the lawyer letters and the talk about tradition and morally and inheritance, he needed the money. Tilda looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something she had not planned. She softened. A very small amount, not visibly, but internally. She said, "Mr. Westergaard, I am sorry you are in trouble, but this shop is not the answer to your trouble. There is no money for you here. The coins are gone, most of them. What's left would not pay your filing fees for a month. The shop itself is worth less than the lawyer would charge you to fight for it." He said, "I thought." Tilda said, "I know what you thought. Someone told you there was a fortune hidden in an old shop. They were not entirely wrong, but the fortune is not yours." She paused. She said, "Go home. Drop the suit. Tell your lawyer you have changed your mind. If you do that, by Monday, I will not say another word about you to anyone in this county. Not your name, not your face, not the fact that you came here today." He looked at her for a long moment. He nodded. Once. He got back in his SUV. He drove away. The lawsuit was withdrawn the following Wednesday. She never heard from Dorset Westergaard again. The community rallied around her in May. Bryony Tilbrook brought her a sour cherry pie. Wilmer Truitt brought her another bag of coal. Goodyear Helfrich brought her an order for 2 more gate hinges and an old photograph of Asaph he had found in his attic. Asaph standing in front of the shop, 1958. He was holding a small horseshoe in one hand and laughing at whoever was holding the camera. Tilda framed the photograph. She hung it above the workbench, beside the 3 hammers. A retired school teacher named Edrith Mossbarger came out one Saturday in June. She was 83 years old. She walked with a cane. She had been a 6th grader at Port Trevorton Elementary in 1947. Asaph had made the iron bell pull for her schoolhouse that year. She still had a small hook he had made for her mother's kitchen. She gave it to Tilda. She said, "It belongs back here, where it was made." Tilda took it. With both hands, she hung it on the wall. The shop was filling up, slowly, with the small, ordinary objects of 50 years, returning home, the way salmon return, the way migratory birds return, the way blood returns to a heart. The shop was becoming itself again. She still had not read the 6th letter. She was not ready. The forge knew. The forge was patient. It was an ordinary October morning, 8 months after she had moved in. A Tuesday, the light coming through the eastern window pale and clear. Tilda was forging a custom door pull for a commission from a couple in Lewisburg. The fire was hot. She was concentrating. She heard the car. She heard it from a long way off, coming up the gravel track, slower than most, stopping, starting, stopping again, like the driver was not sure they wanted to keep going. She set down her hammer. She walked to the doorway. A small silver Honda Civic, 8 years old, pulled up at the edge of the clearing. 2 women got out. One was Tilda's Aunt Pernilla, her father's sister, the aunt she had not seen in 2 years. The other was her mother, Vesna Renfro, standing at the edge of the gravel in the October sun, in a coat too thin for the weather, her hair gone white, her eyes searching the building, searching for something. Tilda did not move. She could not. Aunt Pernilla walked toward her. Pernille was 61 years old, strong build, glasses. She had come up from reading. She did not look like a woman who had been crying, but she had been crying recently. Tilda could see it in her face. Pernilla said, "Tilda, honey, can we talk?" Tilda said, "What is she doing here?" Pernilla said, "I need to tell you some things." Tilda said, "Pernilla, what is she doing here?" Pernilla took her by the arm, gently, the way you take a horse's lead. Pernille said, "Sit down with me, just for a minute, just here on the bench." There was an old wooden bench by the door. Tilda had built it herself, out of scrap oak. 2 months ago, they sat. Vesna stood by the car, about 30 feet away. She had not moved. Pernilla said, "Your mother was diagnosed in May." Tilda did not say anything. Pernille said, "Early onset dementia. They confirmed it at Lehigh Valley. She has known something was wrong for about 4 years. She was hiding it, the way your grandfather hid it, the way your father knew she was hiding it." Tilda said, "I know." Pernilla said, "You know." Tilda said, "Dad wrote me letters." Pernilla's face did something complicated. She said, Oh, thank God." She said, "I have been so afraid I would have to tell you this from scratch. He told me he would. He said he had a way. He told me Linus had it, but I never knew for sure. Tilda said, I have 6 letters. I have read 5. Pernilla said, then you know, the thing she did, the morning she packed your box, the day she put the note on the door. Tilda said, Pernilla, tell me. Tell, Pernille said, honey, your mother had her diagnosis appointment scheduled for the following week. She had been having symptoms for 3 years. Your father had been telling her the year before he died that she needed to see a doctor. She refused. Then he died. And the next 6 months were the worst stretch, the worst before the diagnosis. She did not know what was happening to her. She only knew she was becoming someone she had never been, someone who said things to you she had never wanted to say, someone who could feel herself sliding. Pernille paused. Tilda waited. Pernilla said the morning she packed the box. She had a lucid morning, she told me later. She woke up at 4 a.m. and she walked through the house and she could see everything clearly. The dishes, the mail, your boots by the door. She could see what she had been doing to you for a year. She could see the daughter she loved and the mother she was becoming. Pernilla's voice got smaller. She said, she told me she sat at the kitchen table for 2 hours and she made a decision. She said, I love this girl too much to ruin her. I love this girl too much to do to her what I am going to do to her as this thing gets worse. I am going to push her out now, while I still can, while she still has time to build a life that does not include watching me become someone she cannot recognize. Tilda was not breathing. Pernille said she packed the box that morning while she still had the clarity. She knew she might not have it again. She wrote the note. She put it on the door. She locked herself in the house and she did not come out for 3 days. Pernilla put her hand on Tilda's knee. Pernille said, honey, she did the cruelest thing she could think to do because she loved you. She did it because she was afraid the disease would do something worse, slower, more painful, year by year. She was trying to give you a chance to get out, to not have to be the daughter who watches her mother die in pieces. Tilda looked down at her hands. Her hands were dirty. She had been forging when the car pulled up. There was coal dust on her fingers. She said she has been alone for a year. Pernilla said her sisters have been with her. I have been with her. Linus has been seeing her every 2 weeks. She has not been alone. She has been waiting. She has been waiting for you to find your feet. Linus told her about the magazine article in March. She has the article on her refrigerator. She has been reading it over and over. She cannot always remember exactly what it says, but she remembers it is about you. Tilda looked up. Vesna was still standing by the car. Her hands were folded in front of her, the way she used to fold them at church. When Tilda was small, when the 3 of them had gone to St. John's together on Sundays, Tilda stood up. She did not look at Pernilla. She walked across the gravel, slowly, like a person walking into water. She stopped about 6 feet from her mother. Vesna looked at her. Vesna's eyes were searching her face, searching for the daughter, the version of the daughter, the one she remembered, or the one she could no longer be sure of remembering. Vesna said, Tilda. Tilda said, Mom. Vesna said, is this where the forge is? Tilda said, yes, Mom. Vesna said, your father once said, there was a forge somewhere. He was going to take me. He never did. Tilda said, it's right here, Mom. Vesna said, can I see it? Tilda said, yes. She held out her hand. Vesna took it. Vesna's hand was thin, smaller than Tilda remembered, the veins more visible, the knuckles slightly swollen with arthritis, but it was her mother's hand, the hand that had braided her hair when she was 4, the hand that had pulled the splinter out of her thumb when she was 7, the hand that had set down tea sets she did not want, year after year, in the wrong language, the only language a woman had for love. Tilda led her into the shop. Vesna stood in the middle of the room. She turned in a slow circle. She looked at the forge, the anvil, the tools on the wall, the 3 hammers above the workbench, the framed photograph of Asaph laughing at the camera in 1958. She did not say anything for a long time. Then she walked to the wall. She lifted her hand. She touched the oak handle of Anselm's hammer, the one with the cracked grip, carved when he was 19. She said his father had one like this. She did not say whose father. She did not need to. Her hand did not need her to remember. Her hand already knew. She stood there, touching the hammer, for maybe 2 minutes. Then she lowered her hand. She turned. She looked at Tilda. She said, "I am sorry." Tilda said, "Mom." Vesna said, "I do not always know what I have done, but I know I have done something. I can feel it in my chest. When I look at you, there is something I owe you." Tilda said, "Mom, you don't owe me." Vesna said, "I owe you. I do. I do not remember what it is, but I owe you, and I am sorry." Tilda walked across the floor. She wrapped her arms around her mother. For the first time in 3 years, her mother smelled the way she had always smelled, lavender hand cream, a faint hint of the perfume she had worn since she was 22, the smell of a particular brand of fabric softener she had used since 1996. She smelled like home, the home Tilda had not let herself remember she still wanted. Vesna put her arms around Tilda, slowly, like she was relearning the motion. The 2 of them stood in the middle of the shop, holding each other, while the fire in the forge crackled softly to itself, and the October light came through the eastern window, pale and clear, the way it had been doing for 126 years, since the day Asaph's father had built the place. In 1898, Vesna said, into Tilda's hair. She said, "Your father would have liked this." Tilda said, "I know, Mom." Vesna said, "Did he ever see it?" Tilda said, "Not this one, but he knew about it. He told me to find it." Vesna said, "Good, good. That is something." She did not say anything else. She did not need to. Vesna stayed for 3 days. Pernille stayed with her at the small bed and breakfast in Middelburg. They came out to the shop every morning. They left every afternoon. Vesna sat in a folding chair by the forge. She watched Tilda work. She did not say much. She did not need to. Some mornings she would point at something, the bellows handle, the anvil, the tongs hanging on the wall. She would say, "That one," and Tilda would walk over and pick it up and bring it to her and put it in her hands. Vesna would hold it, turn it slowly, feel the weight. She would say, "Good iron," or sometimes just "yes." She would hand it back. She did not always remember Tilda's name, but she always remembered the iron. On the 3rd afternoon, before they left, Vesna sat in the folding chair. The light from the open door fell across her lap. She watched Tilda hammer out a small leaf shape, cherry red on the anvil, going dark to bright back to dark. Vesna said, "Tilda." Tilda turned. Her mother knew her name today. Tilda said, "Yes, Mom." Vesna said, "Your father would have wanted you here." Tilda said, "I know." Vesna said, "I should have wanted you here too, sooner." Tilda set down the hammer. She walked across the floor. She knelt by her mother's chair. She said, "Mom, you did want me here. You just did not know how to say it." Vesna said, "Did I want you here?" Tilda said, "Yes." Vesna said, "I am not sure I did." Tilda said, "You did, Mom. You did. You just got scared, that's all." Vesna looked at her daughter. She looked at her for a long time. She said, "Tilda, was I a good mother?" Tilda said, "Yes, Mom." Vesna said, "Really?" Tilda said, "Yes." Vesna said, "Even when I—" Tilda said, "Yes, even then." Vesna closed her eyes. She kept them closed for a while. When she opened them, they were wet. She said, "I think I was, some days." Tilda said, "All the days, Mom, even the bad ones, even the days you don't remember, even the days you would not forgive yourself for, you were." Vesna touched Tilda's cheek with the back of her hand. She said, you are a good girl." Tilda said, "I am yours." Vesna smiled, the complicated smile, the one from the doorway of the garage. 40 years ago, when she had watched her husband lean over their daughter's hand to show her the angle of the iron, she said, "Yes, you are." That night, after they had driven away, after Tilda had stood in the gravel watching the Honda Civic disappear back down the road, after she had banked the fire and lit a single lamp and sat down at the workbench with a cup of tea, she picked up the last letter, the 6th, the one she had been saving. She knew, now, she knew it was time. She broke the seal. She read, "Tilda, if you have read this far, you know everything I knew. You know the thing about your mother. You know the thing about my father. You know the language of the tea sets. And you have, I hope, found what you needed to find. Wherever you are, I have a last thing to ask you. Your mother is going to forget me, probably before she forgets you. I have read enough now to know how it goes. The husband fades first, the newer memories, then the children, then the parents, then the language, then everything. By the time you read this, I will be long gone. The man I was will be a flickering thing for her, a name on a card, a face in a photograph. Remember me to her. That is all I ask. When she has forgotten what I sounded like, tell her the things I would have said. When she has forgotten what I smelled like, bring her a flannel shirt from the bottom drawer in our closet, the blue one with the worn elbows. It is still there. I left it. When she has forgotten my favorite meal, cook it for her, beef stew with the bay leaf at the top. She will say, "That is familiar." Tell her, "Yes, Mom, Dad used to make this." Be the version of me she can still hold on to. And when the day comes that she cannot hold on to even that, then sit with her, hold her hand, the way I held yours when you were small. You will know what to do. You have always known what to do. From the day you were born, you have been a person who knew. I love you. I love your mother. I love my father, whose hammer hangs in your forge. I love every smith in the line behind you. I love the man Asaph Westergaard, who you and I never met, but who somehow held a place for you 60 years before you needed it. The world is a stranger and better place than people say. Light the fire, Tilda. Keep it lit. Dad. Tilda set the letter down. She did not cry this time. She had cried enough. She stood up. She walked to the forge. She put her hand on the warm brick. She thought about the 3 hammers above the workbench, about the framed photograph of Asaph in 1958, about the iron hook Edrith Mossbarger had brought home in June. She thought about her mother, asleep in a small bed and breakfast in Middleburg, with Pernilla watching over her. She thought about her father, who had been writing these letters for 2 years before he died, in the basement workshop, with Vesna upstairs, sealing each one, numbering them, trusting Linus Brierly to know when to give them out, trusting his daughter to read them in the right order, trusting the future the way only people who have already left it can trust. She thought about Anselm, the man who had said no when Asaph offered him the shop in 1971, who had been afraid of leaving Allentown, who had been afraid of being who his father needed him to be. She thought about Asaph, who had hidden his best tools in a wall because he believed someone would come, eventually, someone who needed them. She thought about herself, 22 years old, standing in a forge on a hill in Snyder County, the daughter of all of these people, the next one in the line. She picked up her grandfather's hammer, the original one, the one with the cracked oak handle, carved by his hand when he was 19. She set a small piece of steel in the fire. She pumped the bellows. She heated the steel until it was bright cherry red. She brought it out. She set it on the anvil. She struck. The hammer rang. The note rose up through the roof, through the chimney smoke, out into the October sky, across the cornfields and the hayfields and the stand of oak and maple, carrying everything she had been given, carrying everything she would pass on. She struck again. She kept striking. The forge that had been waiting for 50 years was not waiting anymore. It was making something. And the woman who was making it was finally home.